Pat has a very interesting background.
Yeah.
He's a retired lieutenant colonel from the Army and artillery officer. And in addition to that, he's been the president of the Cincinnati Roundtable, been a member of that for several years. And very interesting speaker. We've had him before to talk to us, so I think we'll enjoy his talk. And also, I want to make a couple of announcements here. First of all, I want to put in a plug for the Campbell County Historical Society, which meets the second Tuesday of every month. And I want to thank Shirlene. She's always with us here to do our video, and she does the video for the Campbell County Historical Society, and justifiably she received a nice award at the last meeting. Okay, and thirdly,
are you sure it's the second Tuesday, because that's the
second
same
Thursday,
day as tonight?
Second Thursday, I mean. Thank you, Rob. That's and the Ramish Museum is the other thing I want to put in a plug for. We have a book club that meets.
Well, this month it will be July the 28th.
Oh, just a little. The colonel who became a general, who unfortunately died sadly of cancer, who was our corps commander when I was stationed at Fort Sill. He had quite an appropriate name for being a corps commander in artillery. His name was Colonel Cannon. Gentleman became general. But Pat knew him. Pat was working his funeral.
We had an IG inspection right after he took command, and one of the requirements you need to have is a portrait of all the chain of command, starting with the president. We didn't have a picture of General Cannon. But the monthly Field Artillery magazine has a very nice imprint of a 12-pound Napoleon on the back cover. So we just ripped it out and slipped it in the frame and stood there. And the IG came in and looked at it and said, "Well done." You gotta be flexible. All right, I am retired field artillery, and I have the traditional or standard hearing issue. So when you ask questions, please ask loudly, and if I drop my voice, you have to tell me, because it's difficult to gauge how loud I'm speaking. All right, now, this is a terrible map, because I'm not a cartographer, I'm not an artist in any way, shape, or form, of key areas in and around Chattanooga. The squiggly line represents the Tennessee River. That's Knoxville. That's down eventually in Nashville.
Shouldn't that be in blue?
Well, I have a red marker, and that's what you're stuck on both sides.
It was a bloody battle anyway,
Color
right?
red.
It turned red.
Yeah, that's our branch color, so there. If you would like to render an artist rendering, please. All right, staff work's come a long way since the Civil War. In fact, the actual name of this talk is The Best Laid Plans, et cetera, off Afghanically, I think is the actual Scottish thing. But I did a lot of planning in the artillery. I actually was involved in the planning for the relief of Quezon, although I had no idea what the heck we were doing at the time. And the only reason I remember it is I went to 2 meetings. We were in Vietnam. And it seemed to be my sole function was to carry this bulky document and sat and listened to people talk for, what the hell am I here for? And then at the end of the meeting, the S3 would give me this and carry it back. And after the second meeting, I was being a smart aleck. I was flipping it in the air and catching it. He said, "Pat, that's a top secret document." And I dropped it. Because I said, "I don't have a top secret clearance to the best of my knowledge." Now, we had been put in for it. Most field artillerymen who make company grade will end up with a TS clearance. But I never was told I had it. So there was about 30 minutes of panic. Then they discovered that, yes, I did get it. I had gotten it the previous fall, just no one had bothered to tell me about it. So everybody relaxed. Anyway, when you get a plan, it starts with somebody who says, right, here's what we're going to do, as clearly and succinctly as they can. And they figure out, how are we going to do it? What are the assets we have? What do we need? What are the problems? And you work and you work and you work. And you yell and you scream at each other, pound on desks. It's typical military planning system. In the end, you all get up and go to the old club and have a beer or something else. Because it's a tough business. And when you finish, and it's all finally done, someone says, now what's the worst thing that can happen? Right, okay, so let's plan for that. And that's called contingency planning. And when you spend more time contingency planning, than you do in the actual plan. Because you know 5 minutes after it kicks into operation, something's gonna go wrong. And you have to be ready to figure out what to do. Now, your contingency plans will never match what's going wrong, but there will be something close enough that you can implement it and go. This is not a bad example of Grant doing some contingency planning on his feet. The federal forces, the Army of the Cumberland, ended up in Chattanooga, besieged after the Battle of Chickamauga. General Rosecrans did not have a good day. He was under a lot of pressure. He knew General Garfield had been sent out from the Department of the Army to be a spy. He knew that Charles Dana was there and was a newspaper man. Like all newspaper men, he lied, he distorted, he misreported. He was Staunton's little boy. Staunton hated Rosecrans for the simple reason that General Rosecrans was Roman Catholic. His brother was the auxiliary bishop here in Cincinnati. And Stanton had been a know-nothing, which most people are not aware of. Didn't like Catholics, especially those who made senior rank. So when he got the report that the Army had been badly beaten in Chickamauga, he was looking to remove Rosecrans. And Dana had apparently put some information up that was distorted. Rosecrans was badly shaken, there's no question about that. He got the Army back to to Chattanooga, and they dug a defensive line that encompassed a fair amount of the city of Chattanooga, and they dug it in and built forts and stayed there. The problem was he had not built up any base of supply, which is what he usually did. They were short of food. They had 2 days fighting ammunition. They had an 800 wagon train coming in across a very bad road that went over the rough mountains to the north and west of Chattanooga. And Nathan Bedford Forrest paid them a visit and got all 800. So a couple of days later, a 60 wagon train came in that had ammo, which at least relieved that thing. So Rosecrans made several other mistakes. He pulled the Union forces off the point of Lookout Mountain. And this controlled the river, and it controlled the valley, which was the direct road. Way down here, about 20 miles on the river, was the town of Bridgeport. So forward is a direct route. But I tend to move around a lot. I'm a high school teacher, okay? I move so I can see what that kid in the back's doing. It works. And anyway, he dug in, he made accounts, and then they waited. Now, Rosecrans actually started planning on what to do, and he knew what to do. And it was noted, even Grant said after he relieved him, Rosecrans knew what to do, he had a good plan, he just couldn't bring himself to put it in place. Now, I think all of us, you stop and think, you've known somebody who's a good man and something bad goes wrong, loses his job, whatever it was, and they go into a total funk, and some recover and some don't. So for an extended period, unfortunately, Rosecrans really wasn't sure what to do. In Washington, they immediately dispatched Joseph Hooker and 2 corps to the west, but they knew it would be several weeks because Hooker would have to go downriver to the Mississippi and then come across Tennessee. Grant was alerted, but initially was not told anything else. It wasn't until Garfield came to Washington to take his post as a newly elected member of the House and had a private meeting with Stanton, and Stanton said what happened, and Garfield lied and said, oh, he panicked and left the field, which was not true. But that's when they went to Lincoln, and Lincoln said, well, if he panicked and left the field, he has to be replaced. So Stanton directs Grant to meet him in Louisville. Stanton takes a special train to Louisville, meets Grant en route, and from Indianapolis down to Louisville, they're in Stanton's private car, and no one knows what was transpired. But when he gets to Louisville, he gives him an order, says you are free to relieve or retain General Rosecrans if you want. And Grant and Rosecrans did not get along. I don't know, something happened at the Battle of Corinth. Grant told Rosecrans to do something. Rosecrans told Grant what to do. He didn't take that well. And there was no lost love between the two of them. Unfortunately, there wasn't much lost love between Thomas and Grant, and that went back to something at West Point that I've never been able to find out, except that Grant thought Thomas was slow. Maybe your book will bring this forth.
They'll talk about that for sure.
Say again?
They'll talk about that.
Oh, good, because I really would like to know the details on that. Anyway, when Rosecrans was told he was relieved, he accepted it. He went to Thomas and said, "You've got the army." Thomas objected strongly. Rosecrans had to argue 3 hours because Thomas refused to accept it. He said, "This is wrong. You're unfairly being relieved. I will not take your position." Rosecrans convinces him to take it and leaves early in the morning, meets Grant en route over near Nashville, gives him a full report, makes no apologies for his actions, just as a very military, precise briefing, and this is what the plans are. And afterwards, that's when Grant said, he's got what he needs to do in place, he just can't seem to bring himself to do it. Grant has a difficult 2-day trip over this Walden Ridge Road, which is this muddy road up to the north, comes in on a rainy night, meets Thomas, and according to a report in this book, Wiley Forest Mountains Touched with Fire, they sat there and looked at each other for about 20 minutes, and a very strained silence until an aide comes in and says, "General Thomas, General Grant is wet and cold and probably hungry. He needs dry clothing. He needs food." And then Thomas immediately jumps to his feet and becomes the host. But what's going on with General Bragg? Braxton Bragg is the commander of the Confederates. And I think most of you are aware that Braxton Bragg couldn't get along with himself. He is, I think, the worst general on either side. He is an incompetent boob. He was unfortunately a friend of Jefferson Davis.
Yep.
Davis and Bragg had been together in the Mexican War. Bragg's artillery had supported Davis's Mississippi Rifles along with other units. And Davis thought Bragg was a genius and put him in command. Now Bragg's generals, which included Bishop General Polk or General Bishop Polk, Claiborne, a number of others, had written to Davis requesting that Bragg be replaced. Bragg was aware of it, and once he had been told, once Rosecrans retreated, to attack. Longstreet had come west with his corps. He and Polk and the others told Bragg, pitch into them. They're on the ropes. If you hit them really hard, you'll drive them all the way back to Nashville. Bragg refused to do it. And he didn't. And the Army of the Cumberland survived. Didn't help Bragg's position with his generals.
Didn't Davis actually go to Chattanooga to talk?
Well, Davis came because Bragg decided now that he won and things were calm at the moment in the front, this was his chance to get rid of troublemakers. The first person he went after was Bishop General Polk. And Polk's an interesting character. He went to West Point, he graduated, commissioned second lieutenant. About 90 to 120 days later, he resigned his commission, went to divinity school, was ordained an Episcopal priest. He eventually becomes the Anglican Bishop of New Orleans. When the war broke out, he re-entered the Army and was able to get a Major General's commission. Now, I've known a number of bishops, Catholic bishops at least. I only know one Anglican bishop, but I can't imagine a Catholic bishop. They're nice guys, but I can't see any of them coming into the military as a Major General with a tactical command. But what do I know? I'm just a red leg, okay? I told him, I'm just a muddy boot soldier. I don't have manners. Anyway, one of Polk's problems is he could apparently never decide who he had to obey. If he didn't like an order, he tended not to obey it because, after all, he was bishop. Or if he felt he should modify it, he would tend to do that. Pat Claiborne, Irish-born, actually from County Cork, Emigrated, settled in Arkansas, druggist, attorney, probably the finest divisional commander in the entire Confederate command, as we'll see. Some of the others were decent generals, but not with Braxton Bragg. So when Braxton Bragg relieves Polk, that brings General Davis out, or Jefferson Davis out, not General Davis. And he has a meeting with Bragg, he has a meeting with the generals, and he, unfortunately, his ego is involved because he appointed Bragg to this command. And he said, if you're saying Bragg's bad, then you're saying I'm bad, and I'm the president. And egos have a bad way of getting in the way of things. So he told the generals, you have to work with this man. That's all there is to it. And he tells Bragg, make peace, which Bragg doesn't do. He immediately relieves 3 other generals and sends them on their way. And he relieved, let's see, Simon Bolivar Buckner, Thomas Hindeman, and David Hill. He reduced General Preston, who's a pretty good division commander, to brigade commander. He then splits up the state brigades, mixing units and commanders, damaging unit cohesion. Not something you want to do on a front. He accepted General Hardee as Polk's replacement, although he didn't like Hardee. Hardee is the author of Hardee's Tactics, which was the standard West Point textbook for tactics. And like a lot of textbook authors, Hardee was a book commander. He understood on paper. He wasn't really great at putting it to practical application. Some of us have worked for people like that. They were brilliant in their field, but don't ask them to come in out of the rain because they can't do it. Anyway.
Like, wouldn't that be something you could say about Henry Halleck?
You can say a lot of things about Halleck, but I don't want to get into him. Old brains. I'm told he had a habit, he scratched his elbows when he got nervous, and he was always, if you see the pictures, he's always there with that goofy look. He tries to place Forrest under Wheeler, because Forrest and Wheeler did not get along, and Forrest is told, and Forrest storms into his tent, and violently and loudly chews out General Bragg, ends up by saying, you have threatened to arrest me for not obeying your orders promptly. I dare you to do it, and I say to you, if you ever try to interfere with me or cross my path, it will be at the peril of your life. Yeah, I'm right, sir. I'll have this message for you. Actually, and when he left the tent, another officer said, you're going to court-martialed, and Forrest said, no, he doesn't have the guts to do it. I'm going to put in for a transfer, and he will approve it, and I'll be out of here. And that's exactly what happened. And Bragg could have used Forrest. Bragg could have used a lot of things that he didn't have. All right. So Bragg is horsing around with his commanders. He's not thinking about what to do about the Union forces. His attitude seems to be, we're on the high ground, they're in the valley, they can't do anything to us because we're up here on the high ground. He makes no real disposition of his troops. He has people stationed and watching in several places along the river. He is able to prevent supplies coming down, no, yeah, it would be downriver, no, upriver, excuse me. And he can block, there is a road in Lookout Valley, and he can see that from Lookout Mountain, and he can interdict it with artillery. And that seems to be fine with General Bragg. What about his troops? Well, they're cold, they're wet, they're hungry. Bragg doesn't care. The Confederate supply system was pushing supplies forward. When Bragg retreated, the warehouses down at Chickamauga Station were overflowing with food, hams, beans, peas, blankets, coats, what the Army needs. Bragg never made the attempt to move it the less than 20 miles from Chickamauga Station to his troops in these two field positions. Now, I grew up, I spent a lot of my younger days down in Bell County, Kentucky, which is on the Tennessee-Virginia line. It gets cold in November, it gets cold in October, and the rain is miserable. It's a drizzly, drippy rain, and that cold just eats through you. right? Anybody been down there in that area? Okay. Bragg didn't care. And it's not much better on the north side. They're starving. Some of the big problems was finding wood for fires, finding food. Rosecrans actually, before he left, had shipped off most of the horses because there wasn't forage. He's pinned down because of lack of horses to move things. But the Union Army is holding together. In spite of all their hardships, in many cases, it appears they're doing better than Confederate troops. All right. General Baldy Smith, interesting guy, named obviously for a lack of tonsure, arrived in early October to be the Army's engineer and promptly set about solving the supply and transportation problem. He looked at the Confederate positions and where they commanded, and he went to this area. This is known as Moccasin Point, because it's shaped rather like a moccasin. And from there, he noticed there was Confederate outpost on the river, but there were ridges that concealed this area from the mountain. And any artillery up here on the top of Lookout Mountain couldn't depress the guns enough to hit things here. They didn't have high-angle fire back then. And he says, this is the place, excuse me, to start our action. His plan roughly is, he's going to build barges up here, float them down the river, beach them on the Confederate side, and once the barges have discharged their troops, they're going to be gathered to form a pontoon bridge across Moccasin Point. Then they're going to drive and establish a position here at the foot of the Lookout Mountain. And again, Confederate soldiers, and the artillery especially, cannot depress the cannon enough to hit them. So this is in the works. Hooker has arrived down at Bridgeport, 20 miles south. Rosecrans sends a telegram to Rosecrans, I'm here. Rosecrans said, hold, I can't take you up here, I don't have any supplies, but be ready to move on short notice. And there Hooker stands. And in the meantime, Grant appears. And Thomas and his men informed Grant, this is what we're doing, this is where the plans are, this is what's going on. Grant has said, well, Billy Sherman's coming over with 3 corps. Takes Sherman longer than Grant wanted to get there. He has to kind of traverse, he's over on the Mississippi. He has to traverse across Tennessee. And this is the first time it's recorded that Sherman's boys are stripping the countryside for food and forage and whatever else they need. The March to the Sea was just the final act of this well-planned activity. Although Grant's men did it on their way to Vicksburg. So they're coming. So Grant tells, all right, let's get this supply problem taken care of quickly. So Baldy Smith is told, put your plan in operation. So on a rather foggy night, about 800 men are in barges, and fortunately it's foggy, and the primary area on the south side of the river is occupied by federal troops. Where the Confederates are, they're apparently not paying much attention, which I can understand. A dark, foggy night, it can be really black down there. And the barges just float downriver. And the first warning that Colonel Oates of the 15th Alabama, who's here on the south side, he's part of General, let me think a minute. What's this? Let's see. It is here. Law.
McLaws.
Thank you.
McLaws.
What?
McLaws. He's part of McLaws division, I think.
Well, Oates is part of Longstreet, and Evander Law is the division commander. He had 5 battalions or regiments. 3 had been pulled out. They were up on the ridge. Another brilliant move by General Bragg. So he's left 2 regiments to cover about 20 miles of riverfront. And there were, I think, 3 companies on duty when a barge appears out of the dark, and they barely had time to loose a rough valley, fall back and form a line. before the Union troops are pounding ashore, and they drove. Oates comes forward, tries to form a line. It's a sharp fight. Oates gets more of his men up, and they're trying to flank the Union position, and he doesn't realize more troops are coming across. They've got the initial bridge in place now. And Oates runs into an L-shaped, not really, it's an ambush, but he's flanked by a Union force. Oates goes down with a bullet in the hip, and he's finished for the day, actually for most of the war. Previous to this, on the 24th of October, Thomas had been ordered to cross up here at Chickamauga Creek. And they're going to, the plan is he's going to take the foot of Missionary Ridge and dig in. Because there's a hill up here called Orchard's Knob. They don't realize that's not the foot of the mountain. There's open space between that. But from the north side of the river, that's what it looks like. Now, when Grant approved this plan, neither he nor Sheridan, who was up, his troops weren't up yet, really reconnoitered the area. And they did not talk to local natives. If they'd spoken to natives about what is this terrain, they would have known this. They didn't. Thomas is ordered, take the knob. Thomas, someone said, overreacts, sends a whole corps out. He is ordered General Geiger, is this the right thing? Yes. To take his brigade and attack. Geiger is 5,000 men, defending, again, another understrength Confederate division where units have been pulled out. There's 24th and 28th Alabama. They hear the bugles, they hear troops going, they figure the Federals are doing a review until someone looks up and realizes they're formed in line and looking at me. Sometimes you get that impression. Everybody in the world's shooting and I'm the target. After a couple of days being shot, you realize it's not always true. You just feel like it is. Anyway, they go back to General, I have to pronounce his name, Marigault, Patton Anderson's division. There are 634 men between those two regiments. Marigault, who's writing a letter in his tent, jumps up, runs out to the front position, gets there in time to stand up and see 3 skirmish lines forming, the 3rd behind him, and as he's watching, he hears the command, load at will. And he realizes, this is not a parade. This is not a review. This is for real. Union forces advance very quickly, drive off the 2 regiments. Now, Thomas had told them, just take the position and then I'm going to pull you back. We're not going to hold this. There's no intention to hold this. But when he gets it, and General Wood reports, we've taken the position and there's not a Confederate, there's no opposition here. Thomas quickly changes his mind and says, hold your position. Dig in, prepare. He sends up Sheridan's division and he sends up Wood's division to support them. So they've got a new Union line now across this base. Sherman is told to come north. This is the 27th. Hooker's slow to get started, so he's on the 27th of October, he starts north. And this force here across on the south side at Moccasin Point are a little nervous, they're a little under strain. And as late at night, they realize there's a very large force approaching, and they issue a challenge, and the reply comes back, 15th Massachusetts, and there was a great sigh of relief. This is the first of Hooker's 2 divisions. Now, the trailing brigade of the 2nd Division is in camp because it's dark. They go into camp at a place called Waxahachie. And Bragg is upset because he's aware that Hooker's come up, and he directs Longstreet to do something. Longstreet appoints a brigade commander to go down and police up that. He doesn't think it's a whole brigade, he just thinks it's supply wagons. Jenkins has good intentions but doesn't give clear orders, and darkness and all that stuff, and units get confused and some go north when they should have gone south. And the details are explained in the books, but the long and short of it is General Geary's brigade is encamped. They're attacked. They react very rapidly. There is somewhat of a confusing fight. At one point, the Confederates looked like they were pushing the brigade, who were behind a railroad embankment, until a young artillery officer takes several of his guns and puts them on the other side of the embankment and then shoots down the line, enfilading the Confederate forces that breaks the back of the attack. When dawn comes, the Confederate forces have withdrawn. Geary advances. I should note that General Geary's son was killed in this action. But they close in on Chattanooga. What's Braxton Bragg doing now? Bragg wants to get rid of Longstreet. So finally, he tells him, you go up to Knoxville and attack General Burnside. He's just waiting for you. He sends him north on the 8th of November,
And what year?
1863.
Okay.
Okay, we're 63. Longstreet, he doesn't give him enough supplies. He proceeds to do so, but asks for an additional division because he felt he was outnumbered by Burnside's 9th Corps. The 9th Corps was a large unit. To Longstreet's surprise, Bragg agrees, and on the 22nd of November tells General Claiborne to take his division and go join General Longstreet. Bragg thought that this movement would convince Grant that he was retreating and Grant would go chasing after Longstreet. Bragg didn't know Grant. Grant could care less about Longstreet. He's not fond of Burnside, but he figures Burnside can hold his own, and he stays where he is. And in fact, he has his own plan. So, November 23rd is confusing. Confederate prisoners have reported Bragg was beginning to pull his troops off the mountain. I think that was triggered by the movement of Longstreet's 2 corps north. Grant is anxious to attack Bragg, so late in the morning, he directs Thomas to ascertain if Grant is leaving or not. He wants a small probing mission. Thomas ordered 4 divisions forward. This is when he takes Orchard Knob. And Bragg suddenly realizes Grant's not leaving, he's going to attack. So he frantically telegraphs Claiborne, whose troops are in training at Chickamauga Station, get back here, come home, Daddy needs you. He didn't say that. But Claiborne rapidly moves his troop up and is put in position on top of Missionary Ridge. And he's told, you are the Army's reserve. He has part of Hardee's division, corps over here on Lookout Mountain. He pulls 2 of the 3 divisions off the ridge, brings them off Lookout Mountain, brings them over to Missionary Ridge, and finally the Confederates begin to dig breastworks. Now they've been there for over 2 months. You'd think someone would have thought, but they didn't. So, Bragg leaves General Stevenson to cover the 20-mile-long Missionary Ridge. General Waffle's brigade covers the point. The rest of the division is scattered down the ridgeline. Again, no one seems to dawn on them that you can climb ridges, but they just assumed the Federal Army wouldn't do it. So November 24th, dawned cold, rainy, heavy mist and fog. Hooker had been ordered to demonstrate on the north end of Lookout Mountain, and, if he could, to take it. Hooker's still suffering from a damaged reputation. I kind of like General Hooker. Hooker organized the Army of the Potomac. When Meade got it, it was a well-organized, well-equipped. He's the one that put the Corps artillery concept in place under General Hunt. He organized the Union cavalry under General Pleasanton. He turned it from an ineffective group to a highly effective organization, put the divisions in place, is the one that gave us the patches that we still use today to distinguish ourselves. He just lost confidence in himself at Chancellorsville. So Hooker is looking to regain his luster. He comes up with an interesting plan. He doesn't think you can take this position, but he's willing to give it a shot. So it's one of these, he tells the commander of he sends 3 brigades. He says, you're going to go south. 2 brigades go south till you're clear of the point. Then you cross the creek at the foot of the mountain and angle up the side. Don't try to come up directly, angle up. It's an easier climb. Anyone's ever climbed those mountains know that's the best way to get up. And he has a 3rd brigade station here, and their orders are going to be climb the point once you hear gunfire. And that's what happens. Now, this is the famous battle above the clouds or in the clouds. It's foggy, it's misty, you can't hear a bloody thing. I remember being in one of these situations in Germany on maneuvers, and you could hear people moving, you just did not know where they were until they appeared in front of you. And that's what happens. The Confederate line is anticipating an attack up the point. And out of the mist and the fog, the Union forces appear not only on their flank, but above them. They're on higher ground. And when they pour their opening volleys in, they have flanked and enfiladed the Confederate positions. And the Confederates rapidly abandon their position, and they're driven for about a mile. Again, in the fog, people don't know where they're going, so they can't. It wasn't a hard charge, it's somewhat of a cautious charge. And by early afternoon, they're halfway back down the ridge, or Lookout Mountain. The attack has slowed because ammunition is getting low, it's getting a little confusing, and Hooker decides to call off the attack, or at least hold fast while we get supplies up to you. The Confederates are told reinforcements are on their way. And then at 4 in the afternoon, General Stevenson is told abandon Lookout Mountain. Bring all your troops over to Missionary Ridge, which he does. Another, I don't think, very wise decision of General Bragg, because now he has no idea what's going on over here. So, it's a confusing night for the Confederates, somewhat a confusing night for the Union forces. Troops are marching and counter-marching. Again, it's cold, it's wet, it's foggy, they're not well fed. And they're not getting any rest because they're marching and counter-marching. Now, Bragg makes a brilliant move at this point. He tells General Claiborne, they're going to come up Missionary Ridge. You stop them. Claiborne says, okay, I can do that. And he does. Now, the next day, Grant's grand plan. General Sherman and his corps, supported by a 4th Corps from Howard's Corps, 4th Division from Howard's Corps, forms. And they're going to come up the ridge. And they're going to achieve a wonderful victory. And Grant's good friend Sherman is going to get all the glory he needs. Hooker is directed, you go all the way around the south end of the mountain and come up Missionary Ridge and drive the Confederates from the rear. General Thomas, you, sir, are a Marshall potted plant. You are going to sit out here and look pretty. Initially, Thomas was supposed to do a demonstration, but that was canceled early in the morning. Thomas knew what was going on. But he forms his corps, his army. They're over here. Sherman's here. Grant comes down to Thomas's position because he can see what's happening. So Sherman starts, and if you're familiar with the mountains, they have what we call hollers, or ravine-like things. We used to holler in a holler. I can holler from one side of the mountain to the other. Kentucky jeans, right? And the Union troops are using those ravines as cover. Unfortunately, as you get near the top, they all flatten out, and that's what Claiborne is for his troops. And the Union forces come up to the end of the holler, they're out of the woods, they're out of the cover,
Yeah.
Claiborne's men are smashing them back down. He's got well-placed artillery, plenty of good riflemen, and enough ammunition for a change. And Grant has reported the early part of this attack is very successful. And he's already telegraphed Washington, day is well in hand, we're doing well, victory is ours. And he's over here with General Thomas watching, and he gets to watch as Sherman troops are stopped, and then they start tumbling back down the hill. Not a good thing, it has to be kind of a sinking feeling watching your best troops coming apart. Sherman doesn't get most of his army in place, as I mentioned before the talk. My wife's great-grandfather was there with 70th Ohio, and their adjutant's total report was went in the line next to the 63rd Ohio, stayed there the rest of the day. This adjutant didn't write much of anything. But they didn't move, because Sherman was pinned down by Pat Claiborne. He could only get so many troops up in the area assigned to him, and they weren't making progress, and they were stopped. And Hooker reported he was delayed in his movements, and so Grant had to turn. Grant, to his credit, was quick on his feet. He turned to Thomas, who he did not want to use and did not like, and says, General Thomas, demonstrate against the foot of Missionary Ridge. Now that's apparently what Grant wanted, a demonstration. There were Confederate trench lines here at the foot of the ridge. And Thomas, what Grant envisioned, according to what the reports I've read, was Thomas was to come forward, take those trenches, and hopefully then Bragg would have to send forces off the end of the ridge and down here to the center to support. Now, instructions hurriedly given, not being real clear about what's wanted, and all verbal often lead to trouble. Right? And that's what happened. Thomas formed his corps, the Army of the Cumberland, 2 corps. It took him an hour and a half, and the people on the ridge layer said it was one of the prettiest things they had ever seen. The sun had come out, the road was cleared, they were formed, colors uncased, bugles, fifes, drums, just magnificent sight as they stood there waiting. And then it's 3:40 in the afternoon, 6 quick cannon shots signaled the advance, and the units went forward. What were their instructions? Well, there seems to be some confusion. One division was told, align to the unit on your right. Okay, I can do that. What does that mean? Well, we stay up with the guys on the right. Others were told, go to the foot of the mountain. Others were just told, take the position. Well, which position? The bottom one or the upper one? Take the position. The Confederate forces had equally confusing instructions. General Hardee had told them, wait till the Union forces, if they advance, are within 250 yards, fire a volley, and then scramble up the hill. Some knew that, some didn't. As Thomas's force advances, some of the troops in trenches fired a volley and scrambled up the hill. Others just scrambled up the hill. When Thomas's men hit the position, some stopped, realized that they were under enfilading fire from the top of the ridge. Others just followed the Confederates. And they said you could watch the Union advance, generally led by the colors, an upside down V, with the colors and then blue-clad soldiers scrambling up the side of Missionary Ridge, which is fairly steep. And the Confederates on top often couldn't do anything about it because they couldn't depress the muzzles of the cannon. And to fire, they had to lean way out over the side, exposing themselves. In several places said where they had a clear field of fire, there were Confederate troops coming up the hill, and if they fired, they'd have gotten their own people. We really don't like to do that. So, there was no real defensive position down the ridgeline. Bragg had concentrated, put Claiborne up here, hadn't really done much about the rest of the ridge. So when the Union troops hit the top, if there was a line, it was within 20 feet. And a short, sharp charge collapsed the Confederate line. And that's what happened. As the Union troops came up, formed briefly by company or regiment, started to sweep north. They were sweeping the Confederates with them. And they did. Some of the Confederates came down off the east side of the mountain. Others went into Claiborne's troops. Claiborne realized he's had it. He's being attacked from the rear. Bragg finally has enough intelligence to realize what's going on and orders them all off the hill. And they reform down in the valley. They start retreating south. Now, Claiborne faced 30,000 Federal soldiers with a brigade, or a division, excuse me. 7-1 odds, fought him to a standstill. The next day, as Bragg retreats south, General Hooker is told to pursue him. As they get down near a place called Ringgold Gap, there's a ridge line with a gap in the middle. Bragg goes back to Claiborne and says, you've got to buy us time. I've got to get south of here to the railhead before I'm secured. Claiborne holds Hooker off for 4 hours. He would have held him longer, but he stayed until Bragg sent word back, all right, you're clear, you can withdraw. Again, heavily outnumbered, doesn't stop him. Claiborne is just a superb general. So, as the Confederate soldiers go through Lookout Station, they find all these supplies that they could have used. They're being burned. That does a lot for their morale. They pick up and load what they can, and the rest of them they have to see go up in smoke. All right, so in summation, who did well, who didn't do well? I'm sorry. All right, well, whose reputations were made and lost? Rosecrans' reputation was lost in the War Department, but not with his men. When he would appear at reunions, he was mobbed. He was cheered. I don't think some of the other generals who didn't like Claiborne were happy. Stanton dies in 1867, which is just as good. This would have made him probably give himself ulcers. After the war, he resigns his commission. He has a very successful civilian life. He had several patents before the war. One was an invention of coal oil, which made him quite wealthy. He serves as ambassador to Mexico, then as a congressman in California. I also note that he never complained or felt he had been unjustly treated, which is, you can't say that about a lot of the generals, Warren and Burnside, etc. At his death, he owed 16,000 acres of land in the San Pedro Basin, which today is South Los Angeles. He died in 1898 of pneumonia. He was interred in Arlington Seminary, where President McKinley eulogized his forward commander. Bragg, after Chattanooga, offered his resignation, and to his shock, Davis accepted it. A little late, but that's beside the point. Joe Johnson was named as his replacement. 3 months later, Bragg is called to Richmond. For Davis, he functions as Davis's military aide, and near the end of the war, he's given command of the defense of North Carolina, which he doesn't do very well either. After the war, he moves first to Louisiana and then to Texas. He had a variety of jobs, most of them short duration because he couldn't get along with anybody. And in 1876, he had a massive stroke while walking the streets of Galveston, where he died. He's buried in Magnolia Cemetery in Mobile, and generally considered one of the worst commanders of the war. Leonidas Polk, Bishop, was reinstated, returned to lead a corps under Joe Johnson. During the siege of Atlanta, he and General Hardee rode out on a knoll to absorb federal troop dispositions and was observed by General Sherman, who directed a nearby battery, 5th Indiana, under Captain Simonson. I like those little details. Had a 3-inch ordnance rifle and directs them to fire a shot at the general. Now, you could tell they were general officers. One thing a general officer always has is the flag. It makes it a great target. It says the first shot hit short, but scattered both of the men with dirt, at which point General Hardee decided, discretion being valor, part of valor, he withdrew from the point. Polk must have felt invincible because he stays. The second shot is closer, and the third passed through Polk's left arm, his torso, and then his right before exploding. What was left was initially buried in Atlanta and eventually moved to Christ Church Cathedral in New Orleans. Grant went east, promoted to Lieutenant General, commanded all U.S. forces, and his history is well known, and we will eagerly anticipate a new book, right? At some point in time. Sherman commanded the Western armies, defeated Joe Johnson. When Grant retired to enter politics, he would be promoted to 3-star and become commander of the army. He died in New York in 1891. An interesting side note, Sherman had been baptized Catholic but never practiced his faith. He married a Catholic girl. She did practice her faith. His children were Catholic, and his one son, Thomas, was ordained a Jesuit priest. And at some point, He was at Georgetown when my dad was at Georgetown, because Dad talked about him. And I said, what was he like? He said, red hair and a hell of a temper. Okay, kind of like his dad. Anyway, Hooker's reputation was neither hurt nor helped. He would leave the Army after suffering a stroke in 1866. Had declining health, married Olivia Grosbeck of Cincinnati in 1864, lived here, died while visiting Garden City, New York in 1879, buried in Spring Grove Cemetery. The saddest legacy is Pat Claiborne, brilliant tactician. He is one of the generals killed in the Battle of Franklin when John Bell Hood loses his temper and orders the division commanders to the front. And they lose 7 division commanders that afternoon. George Henry Thomas, an extremely fine and competent commander, moves at his own pace. He was slow, but when he moved, it was devastating. Takes out John Bell Hood's Confederate Army in a winter fight in front of Nashville. His family, he is from Virginia. He married a girl from New York. After the war, someone asked, is it your wife's New York background that made you stay with the Union Army? He said, no. I took an oath of office. I kept my oath of office. His wife later said, I never said anything. I just told him, you do what you want to do. I will support you. But Thomas, again, was a competent and loyal officer. His word was his bond.
I understand the rest of his family wouldn't talk to him after the
The
war.
Virginia family would never talk to him. The old picture to the wall bit, he offered them aid after the war, they wouldn't even answer his reply, so he never talked to his family again, his Virginia family. He stays in Nashville till 1869, then he requests a transfer to the Division of Pacific, headquartered in Presidio. That's not a bad place back then to be stationed. I wouldn't want to be there now. Anyway, he dies on March 28, 1870, 4 months after arriving of a stroke. He refused to write his memoirs and had his wife destroy all of his papers.
Oh, yeah.
He said, I'm not going to be involved in any of these petty controversies. They burned everything. So, he's buried in Troy, New York, his wife's hometown.
Good.
Sorry, not carefully put together. You know how he had to struggle with his blood thing because I'm not a computer person.
Did pretty well.
So, did it meet your expectations?
It did. It was
Okay, I'm so
wonderful.
happy.
Thank you.
I wish Don Lynn would have been here tonight, but he's kind of an expert on Thomas.
Well, these are interesting fights. I get very interested. Of course, I'm an artilleryman, and I tend to favor the artillery. And people like General Hunt, who had the first book today was called War Artillery.